last years of the 19th century, that human affairs were being watched from the timeless worlds of space. No one could have dreamed we were being scrutinized as someone with a microscope studies creatures that swarm and multiply in a drop of water. Few men even considered the possibility of life on other planets. And yet, across the gulf of space, minds immeasurably superior to ours regarded this Earth with envious eyes. And slowly and surely, they drew their plans against us.
Broadcasting live
from a tiny studio somewhere in North America.
This is Dark Matters Radio Live. And now I give you your host,
the silverback of ufology.
Here's Don Ecker.
And welcome. This second day of December 2024 with Thanksgiving just a few days behind us. In 22 days, just 3 weeks and 1 day, it's going to be Christmas Eve. Wow. I just can't believe how quickly this year scooted by. And for what it's worth, as far as I am concerned, it can't be over quick enough. That's all I'm going to say about that right now. This is not what that's about. So, and if you're on the money, you know what I'm talking about. If you're not, well, you're going to have a mystery to solve. But the bottom line is Thanksgiving. It's always been one of my favorite holidays. Now, since my wife and I have been together, have been married, I cook as a rule every holiday dinner. And for the last several years, I told my wife Vicky, I said, I'm so tired of turkey. Let's do something else. So we've done things like little Cornish game hens, 2 or 3 of those. I mean, we generally celebrate Thanksgiving, just the 2 of us, with our dogs. And a turkey usually, and I got to be honest, I had forgotten how much can be on a turkey. So anyway, this year, about a month or 2 ago, I said to Vicky, I said, maybe we will have a turkey this year. It's been a while since I did all that. And I said, I got to say, I've always enjoyed it. So she said, well, I'm going to go shopping and I'll see if I can find us a small one. I said, cool. So she goes shopping. The smallest she could find was a 12-pound bird. So she brought that thing home. The day before Thanksgiving, we took it out of the refrigerator to let it defrost, to thaw. And then I made the dressing. And I always do that. I saute things like onions, celery, mushrooms to put into the dressing. Did all that stuff, got the dressing ready, checked the bird. Bird looked good, but damn, it looked big. So I get the thing all ready, pop it into the oven. 3 hours later, pull it out. It was beautiful because I always I rub it down with butter every 45 minutes or so until it's done. Well, it came out golden brown. And I started slicing it up, and we had our dinner. Had mashed potatoes, green beans, etc. And the bottom line was, when we got done, there's still about 10.5 pounds of turkey in the damn refrigerator. So this afternoon, Vicky brought out one of her recipe folders. Stuff you can do with turkey. Now, my job this week is to pick out some recipes because she's bound and determined we're going to do that. So the bottom line is, hey, I hope you all had a wonderful Thanksgiving surrounded by family, friends. And I got to say, one other thing I noticed before it was all said and done. At the beginning of this monologue, I mentioned how quickly this year has streamed past. Do you remember when you were a kid? Oh, anywhere from 6 to 12, 13, 14 years old. This time of season, well, at least for me, was always magical. Thanksgiving, and then about a month later, Christmas. And then it was another year of waiting for Christmas to roll around again. But as you get older, time seems to speed up. Now, it actually doesn't, of course, at least not as far as I know. But the bottom line is, the older you get, the quicker things seem to happen. That's something that I've always thought was a mystery. Maybe it's because you have more life experience, more things going on in your life, things that you're dealing with all the time. But it does zip past. Of course, April 15th every year with the IRS, that's another one. But that's not a happy one. So anyway, well, tonight we have Dr. John Brandenberg back as our guest here at Dark Matters Radio. Dr. Brandenberg, we've got a number of topics we're going to be hitting. One of the things he told me earlier, he wanted to talk about one of his books, which is basically, well, kind of like, let me just boil it down to the nubbins, kind of like an explanation for everything. Well, we'll see if that's workable. And of course, Mr. Mark Center is with us, who's been with me since the beginning of this cycle of DMR, and Mr. Gerry Kissel, whom we fondly call Gary. So with that said, let's do it. Chanel, bring all those folks on. John, good to see you, buddy. How you doing?
Always a pleasure and honor to be on you guys' show. Great to see you, Gary, Mark.
Yeah, I just hung out with you a week ago.
And always Mr. Silver back there.
Yes. Well, Mr. Center informed us earlier. Generally, he is a two-car family, but his wife's vehicle is suffering some mechanical problems, so he's probably going to be leaving us 15 minutes after the next hour.
Yes.
But with that being said, Mark, you got to squeeze everything in you can, buddy. And Gary?
Yes.
Gary?
Hit with your best shot, Mark.
Oh, he will. How's things going, Gary?
Not too bad. Just getting more and more gray in my beard so I can finally become my own silverback.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, got to work with what you got, buddy. So, John, what is up in the world of UFO UAPs, buddy?
I think we discussed earlier, I put out a big book, The Big Picture. The
book that explains everything, right?
This whole UFO experience
The book that explains everything.
Yes. The theory of everything. I'm just joking, of course. Here these physicists are talking about, I call it my big toe. They're bragging about my big toe, theory of everything. And they haven't got a clue as to what 90% of the universe is made out of. Is the dark matter. Your stuff, Don, the dark matter. It's 90% of the mass of the universe. They don't even know what it is. And yet they're...
Well, you know what dark matter is for me, buddy?
What?
Dark matter for me. When I first stumble out into the kitchen in the morning, pouring that first cup of coffee. That's what makes the world go around.
All right. Well, okay. Here we are. Planet Earth, orbiting the sun. We got two planets in the solar system that are very similar to us. I mean, Venus is a twin sister. And then they look at Proxima Centauri, Proxima being it's the closest star in the entire universe. It's got a planet orbiting it in the liquid water zone around this little star that it orbits.
Goldilocks zone.
The Goldilocks zone. It's almost exactly the same size as Earth and the same mass. Now, this tells you something.
Well, first, wait. What's the approximate age of its star?
My understanding, it's about the same age as our sun.
About 5 billion years old.
Yeah.
Okay.
Earth and Alpha Centauri. I remember going to Hawaii, to Maui, and getting up at 4 a.m. to watch Alpha Centauri rise. It's a beautiful gold star, really bright. But instead of like a bright blue star, it's brilliant gold, just like the sun. And it's actually a triple star system. It's got 2 stars like the sun, and then a third little runt of a star called a red dwarf. But that's where this planet is, and the red dwarf is closest to Earth. And so what this tells us is that the universe is probably full of planets like ourselves. I mean, your first guess is that, okay, we got this solar system, we got this solar system around this other planet, the other star, a planet sticking out like a sore thumb in the Goldilocks zone, and it's almost the same size as Earth. So we have every reason to expect scientifically that we wouldn't be alone in the universe, that there would be other Earths, with their own people. And okay, so that's just all science 101. Okay, now we've had a pretty stormy history, but we haven't been invaded from outer space that we know of. The only references to anything like that was, even in the Bible, it says these people from the sky liked Earth women and came down and had children with them. And I've talked to Christian fundamentalists, and I used to be one when I was a kid. My parents were fundamentalists, and they said, "Oh, well, those were angels." And I said, "Well, their behavior was hardly angelic, was it?"
Right.
So it looks like we were the port of call, and people like us, they could have children with us. It says that the children of these unions were great men. Great people say they were giants. I just say no, they were just men of renown, about whom many legends are written, like the Greek legends, Perseus, Hercules. These guys were all sons of one of the gods with an earth girl. And so we apparently had extraterrestrial contact in the past. There's the reputation for, if somebody is high and mighty, they're blue-blooded. There are reports, fairly persistent, that one of the groups of the aliens, the Greys, has copper-based blood, and it's blue. They actually occurs on Earth. Octopi, squid, crabs, scorpions, tarantulas have blue blood. It's based on copper, not on iron. Now, so if you look at the depictions of the Hindu gods, they're colored blue. So this may have been how people remember some blue-blooded aliens showing up. One wonders how they found out that their blood was blue. They must have crashed their spacecraft just like they do reportedly in the present era. So, but what I'm trying to do is paint a picture in this book called Cosmic Awakening, is that we have been kind of just left alone here on this planet. And now we're kind of being initiated into the, you could jokingly call the cosmic fraternity. This is our hazing. It's what you call a rite of passage. It's okay. First, some people show up, and then some other people show up, and they apparently get in a fight over who owns this place or who's going to dominate this area, and eventually, and I would argue, and I will expand on this. It looks to me like we have gotten through the worst of this. We are some lucky sons of guns. By a few quirks of fate, we seem to have gotten through this period without any Independence Day or War of the Worlds type invasion, which would have been bad. I watched both those movies, and the invasions were bad. And now it looks like people who may have visited Earth and sired children here are here watching over us. They may bill us.
Well, John, wait a minute. I got to ask you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Now, I have been a sci-fi nerd for most of my life. Okay.
Good for you.
I can go back and recall the first time I saw The Thing, the original Thing with James Arnett. I was about 6 or 7, and they ran it on one of our local TV stations. That freaked me out. And I've always been, well, if that ever really, something like that happened, we'd get out there and fight them off. But then I started thinking later, well, if they had the technology to get from all the way out there to here in a reasonable amount of time, truthfully speaking, how much of a chance would we actually have? I mean, they've already shown they can switch off our nuclear weapons. Okay. They've shown that. So probably our only hope would be there was another ET civilization out there that might stand by us. What do you think about that?
Oh, I think that's a very reasonable supposition. We're kind of under the protection of some galactic federation. And, the reports are that there's people out there who are basically just humans. We can have children. They can have children with us, and the children are normal, and they have red blood like ours, and red-blooded in every sense of the word. And since we're blood kin, they're just watching out for us. I joke later they may come by and recruit infantry from this place.
Well, blood kin how? Because the only thing that would seem to make sense to me is that we are somehow related to them. Now, that could mean any number of things. That could mean that they had early colonists, perhaps, that came to this planet. And not all of them, just, hell, England ended up in Australia. Of course, it was a prison colony, but okay. Maybe we are a prison colony. Who knows?
It would explain a lot, Don.
Well, geneticists have said that, they've been mapping human DNA, that it's clearly older than 6 to 8 million years, the DNA itself. So
sure,
that kind of puts a problem for those who say humans have only been around for, maybe 100, 200,000 years.
Well, yeah. And just imagine a primitive planet like ourselves, which is a nice place to live. You would think we'd just be low-hanging fruit for any other advanced race to come here. However, and this is something I always want to remind people of, because I worked in Washington, D.C. I saw how things were done in this neck of the woods, this planet. Not only is intelligence found elsewhere in the universe, but so is complete incompetence. And so don't forget, no matter how smart you are, there's always the possibility of the big, massive screw up. And I think we may have seen one of those here at this planet. But when I was in DC, I heard from people who I considered absolutely reliable that there were people down here who looked and acted human, and you could not tell them, apparently even by blood type or genetics, from terrestrial human beings. And the conversation I had initially started out that this was considered a problem for the security people, because they thought they might be infiltrating the government and getting security clearances. And this was considered a problem. And this was back in 1992, just after the end of the Cold War. So, but given the hostility of the little gray type aliens, I mean, by the way, we're having a lot of cattle mutilations now up here in Oregon. I moved up here from Texas, and now they're having a lot of cattle mutilations, and they are fairly classic.
You think it's the excess amount of, Marxists up there that might be eating the cattle?
Gary, that's a good theory. It's all the people who moved up here from California.
That's what it is.
They called it the Californication of Oregon. And,
well, I do want to point out something you said there, because what you're
yes.
talking about was Hanlon's razor, which I posted in the comments too, which is don't attribute to malice what could more adequately be explained away as stupidity.
Yes. I learned that. I learned that phrase in Washington, D.C. Well, I was working there for 15 years with the Pentagon and agencies and various labs around the.
So you're saying in the early 90s that you were told that maybe some of these people might get security clearances. Is it a coincidence that Pelosi had her first term start in '87? Just throwing it out there.
I think you're throwing it out there, and I think this is a valid point. But she would work for the Grays, I would think.
I know she's not working for us. Let's leave it there.
I noticed she's never presented us a blood sample to see whether it's blue or red. And so I'm not saying it's true. I'm just saying I'm suspicious. I have suspicion.
Now this is where I might make a joke about Botox, but I'm not gonna. Okay,
but
I'm not gonna.
But her husband did leave us a blood sample when he got hit in the head. But okay.
Yeah.
Are we in trouble on YouTube yet? Here we're living in the modern age, and that was an example of the kinds of screw up that would prevent Earth from being conquered by somebody from outer space.
Absolutely.
What do you mean? What do you mean you didn't send batteries for the ray guns?
Well, back in 81, 82, while I was still an investigator, I investigated 2 cattle mutilations. Okay?
Yes.
And that's those cases were never solved,
No.
like many other tens of thousands of cases that have never been solved. But it was also several years after that, around 87, 88, that I first made acquaintance with John Lear.
Yeah.
Now, there's a name that in years past was very well known in the UFO field. As time passed along from 88, 89, 90, John, in my opinion, began to slip more and more from reality with the idea of other life forms inhabiting our solar system, including, he maintained, several million living on the moon. Now, I had him on my show, this show, and I really queried him about that. And it got to the point where, in effect, he said, I pissed him off.
Sure.
He said, look, you don't believe me? That's fine. So, but my point was,
yeah,
this is because I had already experienced it, but he was suggesting that one of the reasons these animals were being mutilated, and they were all exsanguinated.
yes,
right?
yes, they were.
That means they were drained of all their blood and body fluids somehow. Yep. Another mystery that nobody can adequately explain. But he suggested, Lear, in his original paper that he wrote that came out first on the Paranet computer system,
yes,
Paranet Alpha, down in at the time in Arizona, Jim, who was actually the founder of Paranet, Jim Spicer,
yes,
sent me a copy of that, and I read it, and he said that bovine blood from cattle and what have you, can, in an emergency, be substituted. Of course, it would have to go through processing, but substituted for human blood. Now, I never, and this has been well over 30 years ago, I never really followed up on that to any great depth, but that may be one of the things. Now, you said that Oregon now is showing increasing numbers of mutilations.
yes.
Have the press been covering that?
Oh, no. They have not.
Have you talked to any cops about this? Any veterinarians? Any ranchers? Where did you hear this?
I did talk to a rancher who had a cow mutilated on his property, and he started trembling slightly talking about it. It was a horrific experience to discover this cow had been mutilated in classic fashion. And there was one humorous aspect. It was a cow out on the back 40, and they just had him in a pasture, and then they check on him every 2 or 3 days. And so finally they did see some strange lights in the sky one night, and then the next day they checked on the cow, and it had been mutilated, surgical cuts around the genitals and the rectum and all of that. The tongue was all the standard stuff. In fact, just the same pattern of stuff that was found with supposedly a Sergeant Lovett on White Sands was found mutilated the same way in the 1950s. But he said they called a vet out to look at this cow, and the vet looked at the cow up and down and checked its mouth. It still had grass in its mouth. And normally that's a sign of a lightning strike on a cow. You know, lightning kills cows occasionally.
Instantly.
And if they're unlucky. And so he said they brought the vet out to see if there was anything he could. They had insurance on the cow, and the vet said, there's grass in his mouth, looks like lightning to me. He says, give me your form and I'll sign it. He says, you should just be, it's your lucky day that there's no insurance people anywhere around here.
Well, okay.
So
all right.
What's that?
Here's the thing. Having been personally involved in investigations regarding that. Now, that was not my expertise, not my forte.
That's Linda
That was only 2 cases that I ever was involved with. But when I became involved in researching human mutilations, all right, I talked to a hell of a lot of people. Now, here's the bottom line as far as I'm concerned. Number one, the federal government has consistently brushed this off. Municipal police departments and state police departments, like the state police, are limited in what the hell they can do. Now, back in 75, I believe it was a New Mexico, Harrison Schmidt, was it, I think?
Yeah.
That tried to get the FBI involved in this. It obviously crossed state lines. All right.
Yeah, absolutely.
It obviously crossed, because I'm aware of cases in Oregon, Washington, North Carolina, Colorado, Pennsylvania. I mean, it's worldwide. But the FBI shied away from it. And I always wondered about that. And number 2, this is a phenomenon that could prove to be problematic ultimately for the human race. Do you recall, what is it now, 20 years ago, when the brain disease surfaced in cattle?
Yes,
cow disease.
For a while, there was a great fear. I mean, hell, everybody in those days were going to McDonald's and Burger King and you name it, where they were doing hamburgers with a true fear. My God, what if I got mad cow disease?
Yep.
And as a matter of fact, I used to watch years ago a TV series on commercial TV, Boston Legal, and William Shatner portrayed a very colorful lawyer by the name of Denny Crane, and an inordinate fondness for 45 caliber pistols. Okay. And that was the running joke. He would tell everybody he's suffering from mad cow disease. So,
well, they managed to squelch that one, because they were grinding up brains and putting them in the hamburger, and they realized very quickly that was not a good idea. That's where the agent, I think they're called prions, and boy, these things are really tough. You can boil them in formaldehyde. You could, and nothing can kill them. They're really tough, but the way they apparently just like nerve tissue. So, but they managed to squelch that, and who knows how many bodies are buried out in the North 40 someplace that they wouldn't allow autopsies done, just because they didn't want they they didn't want a big fuss about it. It could, as you know, I wrote this novel, Morning Star Pass, about the collapse of the UFO cover-up. And it's interesting, the cattle mutilation thing was really blown up by Linda Moulton Howe, very courageous. Imagine a woman going out and seeing all these mutilations. That's pretty unusual behavior to go. She's made of very stern stuff to do that, and she managed to get that publicized. Immediately the government reached out to her apparently and started giving her inside information. One thing that people have pointed out to me is she never
a lot of inside disinformation. One Richard Doty.
Oh, that's an easy call. She was, they decided that she was causing trouble, so they kind of offered her inside information. And one of the things people have pointed out to me is she never talks about human mutilation. And of course, there was a big case in Russia of a bunch of hikers out in a area, 9 hikers, Ditlov Pass. And this was the Russian introduction. Now, hey, you're Russian, gone through World War II. Mutilations of people are no big deal. The only problem here was there were no Germans involved, and so, but they, that story has come out. But then the other one was in the American military. A Sergeant Lovett was apparently abducted and then found 10 kilometers later the next day, all mutilated in classic fashion. They became very familiar from the count. Now, you'll notice, by the way, the exsanguination that was seen with him, it also appears in The Thing in 1951.
Yeah, the alien.
He's draining blood from people.
Right.
And in fact, the original. What's that?
And dogs.
And dogs. The original human and animal mutilations seen in science fiction associated extraterrestrials was in The Thing in 1951. And so the government apparently knew about this for a long time. And, Hollywood's always had a secret pipeline to Langley, Virginia, and where the CIA headquarters is. And they get, script ideas and maybe even bank loans to make movies from.
I interviewed back in, this is about 8-9 years ago, a retired CIA agent, who, you may recall this, had found at Langley in an unsecured location a reference to the Roswell incident. And he had said that to somebody, and it made news around the country. So I went out and I tracked this guy down and called him up, talked to him. He agreed to come on DMR. Actually, I did 2 shows with him back to back. Okay.
Uh-huh.
I was doing 5 nights a week then. And later, this was before the first administration of Donald Trump. There was some kind of problem that was developing with North Korea. They were shooting all kinds of missiles into the Sea of Japan and over Japan. Okay.
Yes.
And it was freaking everybody out. And make a long story short, I called this guy up And I I still do have his phone number, his home number. And I said, hey, love to have you come on and talk about this North Korean business. And he kind of chuckled and he said, well, Don, he said, I really can't. And I said, why not? Why not? He said, well, apparently they listened to my 2 interviews on your show about the Roswell thing and other stuff we talked about, and they weren't real happy with me. They had 2 guys show up my door and knock on the door, and
we do make house calls in the
knock
CIA.
that shit off. Knock that shit off. So,
point of order.
Point of order.
Yes, when you bring up that about some of the plots and the scripts and the stories, etc., Don's been watching the first season of the X-Files, which is the best season of the X-Files.
Sure.
And he recounted a story to me that when most of us used to go to the UFO West conventions, the people who worked on that would show up and they'd clean Don out of all the back issues of UFO magazine, right? So in that fashion, they would look through there and go, okay, what ET thing can we glean off of the work that Don and Vicky had been doing?
Sure.
Then they started to run out of that because, let's be honest, there's not endless amounts of confirmed or somewhat confirmed things. So then they went to the monster of the week, right? And they started to suffer from that. But it's interesting that they would go to those conventions, and I went to a lot of those. I met Don there, and they would just clean them out. Buy all these magazines. We need some we need some inspiration. Right?
Inspiration.
Yes.
Well, this CIA guy, the point that I wanted to make was he was stationed in LA to work directly with Hollywood.
Oh, well, okay.
Of course.
Okay.
Hey, I mean, we designed the CIA following the MI6 model. What did the British do just before 1937? They released this movie Shape of Things to Come was a story by H.G. Wells. It's preparing the British public for World War II. They actually have scenes in there that look just like the London Blitz. London being bombed, and boy, they didn't pull any punches. That they had the war last until from 1940 to 1978 before the Allies won it, and the world was just pretty much destroyed after that. And so they were preparing their people for this war. In fact, the war started in 1939. So they knew what they were doing, and they were telling the Brits to British population to have a stiff upper lip because of what's coming. And you didn't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out they were headed for World War II after the crises in Europe, Neville Chamberlain, Peace for Our Time, things like that. So there's a tradition that Hollywood or its equivalent in other countries will release movies that they think are necessary to inform the public and make them toughen up.
Well, in 1996, the biggest movie in years premiered. ID4, Independence Day. Okay. And when that thing was first released, for weeks, they were running it 24 hours a day. And you would find lines of moviegoers going around the block trying to get in and get tickets. Now, we at UFO Magazine had worked with them on some things, and ultimately did a big feature article on this movie before it came out. And the movie was so successful. All right. I talked, and Vicky talked to some of the producers, And they had gone to the U.S. government, all right, and asked if they would be willing to help with this movie, with,
Maybe.
you know, kind of things, equipment, what have you. They said they would, except they told the producers, Dean Devlin and the other guy,
Roland
the
Emmerich.
German guy.
Roland
Yeah,
Emmerich.
Emmerich. They told them, well, we'll help you providing you take out all reference to Area 51.
Oh,
Yeah, they agreed to work with
Everybody-
them if they would do that, and they refused to do it.
Yeah. And
so
the bottom line
yeah, they
was
didn't call it Site 51. They just called it something else.
Area
There was
51.
that. There was that news.
So anyway, then the governor at that time of the state of Nevada decided to do a touristy thing, and the highway that ran past the range there and where Area 51 is situated, the black mailbox, all that kind of crap, we're going to rename it the ET Highway. So they called us up, Vicki and I, and asked if we would be willing to come over and speak at this dedication. And they had all these people from the movie there. And they put us up in one of the fancy hotels, all expenses paid. And so we were happy. We went down, got on the bus where all the movie stars were on the bus. Now, we had done a hell of a lot for that fucking movie. And the bottom line was
successful, Don. You made it a blockbuster.
Well, no, some of the movie stars wanted to know who the hell Vicki and I were. Okay. They took us off that bus. Put us on another bus. All right.
How dare you be in the rarefied air of Jeff?
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, that pissed me off.
Well, yeah,
This area is for
So,
left-wingers only, man.
Every night, okay, back at the hotel, I made sure we only had our dinners with room service. And room service is more expensive anyway. So
Yeah.
I ordered every goddamn expensive thing on that menu I could order. So yeah, so that's a little, that's a little.
Filet
By
mignon
the way,
with caviar on top, right?
Zach's
Pretty damn-
is in the chat right now, and he wanted to point out that black mailbox is racist. It should be mailbox of color.
Yes.
Well, it
yes.
actually is. It's actually white.
So when
The black mailbox is white.
so when John talks about the making and releasing of movies to get people ready, it just so happens that on November 27th, I watched for the first time in 40 years Outbreak from 1995 with Dustin Hoffman. And,
that was a good movie.
And
my
Dale
boss is in it.
And
That's
Dale
right.
die. And
That's
now
right.
that we had our pandemic, pretty crazy, right? Because of course you're going to follow some things no matter what the pandemic is. So I understand that, but it was pretty interesting to watch them, blow up the village, and then they want to blow up this and that, and how they tried to hide it in the media and all that. So it was very interesting that I'm wondering, the conspiracy.
If they knew something was coming.
Did they do that then let's call it Mad Cow or whatever, right? But was there any of that in there? I enjoyed the movie. It was Dustin Hoffman's.
It was good. It was a good movie.
Good movie. And Dale Dye was great in it because he was just a smart.
Dale Dye's always great.
I loved it. I just loved it.
So
I guess you're loving this, and he's got that shit-eating grin on his face.
Yeah.
When he gets when he gets to put in Mr. Sutherland in the jail. But it's a great movie. If the folks out there have never seen it, or if you haven't seen it since COVID, check out Outbreak 1995. It's a fun movie. It's well done.
The movie
by the
was
way-
really over the concerns of Ebola. Is what?
They did bring up that.
Oh yeah, the Ebola outbreak. And they didn't. Well, I was going to mention there was one movie before 9/11 happened called The Siege with Bruce Willis.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And
Back in
that was
97,
that
I
was a
think it
full
was.
dress rehearsal for a big terrorist attack in New York. And but I wanted to mention I have I'm a physicist. I have a theory that you can actually track the secret history of the UFO, the posture of the government about UFOs from the movies. The rumor is that we ended up with a secret treaty with the Greys. I mean, if we were in bed with Papa Doc Duvalier, you all remember him, sometimes you want to keep your friends close and your enemies closer. Supposedly under the Nixon administration, they signed this treaty at Holloman Air Force Base with the Greys.
Right.
And that turned out to be a complete
And that was
fiasco.
64 or 62 when that happened.
So I heard it was like the initial meeting may have been like in 64, 65, but the final under Johnson. And what basically was the U.S. government was seeking, we were losing the war in Vietnam. The public support had gone away for it. And so they were trying to seek detente, not only with the Russians, some breathing space, but apparently detente with our little short gray friends from outer space. So they signed this treaty, and the celebration of that, they signed it in like 1969, the first year or so of Nixon's administration. The celebration of that was Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And you remember, of course, this big love fest with the little gray people. And then, according to John Lear and other people I've talked to, like Leonard Stringfield, unfortunately no longer with us, neither is John. This whole thing turned into a complete shit show. They lied to us, believe it or not. They were not following the treaty they had signed. And so, they were supposed to maybe abduct a few people and check our, genetics and stuff. And then in return, they were supposed to give us all this technology, anti-gravity and cure for cancer and death ray. It still is the Cold War. We wanted death ray from them. So all of this apparently went south, and Jimmy Carter is sitting in his White House office, in the Oval Office, one day. He can't find out anything about the UFO cover-up, even though he saw one with 10 people. And he knows that they're keeping this secret from him. Suddenly, this bunch of admirals and generals march into his office with people from the agencies and say, "Mr. President, we have a situation." And he says, "Yes." And they said, "Oh, the UFO aliens that we have a secret treaty with for technology, exchange. We just had a firefight with them at our base in Dulce, New Mexico. We thought we better tell you about this." And so that apparently happened, and it happened just before the Iran hostage crisis and the invasion of Afghanistan by the Russians. But the Hollywood movie that came out after that was the movie Alien.
Yep, 79.
What?
Which is about betrayal.
Alien.
Yeah.
Movie Alien.
Yeah.
Came out in 78 after the clash at Dulce. And so if you watch these two movies, here's Close Encounters, this giant love fest at the end, people that they abducted and terrorized and stuff like that. They're letting them back. And then, okay, everything's great. Hynek is there in the grinning ear from ear. And then, of course, a couple of years later, that was like 77, 75. A couple of years later, suddenly Alien, and, where, they didn't get along well with the alien. In fact, the problem was the powers that be were feeding the crew to the alien life form so they could get some scientific. They wanted him as a scientific specimen, and the people on the ship were expendable. What's that?
For military applications.
Yeah, for military applications, they wanted a super weapon. So,
well, John, we're gonna have to postpone this till the other side of the hour. We're at the top of the hour right now, and in light of what we're talking about, something else that I happened to catch this morning that I want to mention is an alleged group of ETs known as the Tall Whites. This is Dark Matters Radio, brought to you exclusively by KGRA DB. Tonight, John Brandenberg, PhD, is our very special guest, along with Mr. Gerry Kissel, Gary, and Mr. Mark Center. We'll be back after these words. Stick around.
All right.
Hey members, the new KGRA DB app is now available on iOS and Android devices. Gain on-demand access to any KGRA DB programming. Download any show directly to your mobile device to listen or watch on the go. Go to the App Store and search KGRA DB.
Are we alone in the universe? The most important question facing humanity is on the verge of being settled once and for all. The Mutual UFO Network has been at the forefront of this journey for nearly 50 years. Our members worldwide are dedicated to the research, documentation, and awareness that will shape the future of humanity. Won't you join us?
Are you looking to go on a faraway journey that is magical and mysterious, reaping on mystical legends? If so, then Mysterious Adventure Tours is perfect for you. Imagine a voyage to explore ancient mysteries of Ireland, haunted majesties of Scotland, or their chilling Birth of the Vampires in Romania. These small esoteric getaways are limited and do fill up fast. So, go to mysteriousAdventuretours.com and book your trip soon.
You're listening to the KGRA Digital Broadcasting Network. We provide unparalleled coverage of trending news in the world of ufology, cryptozoology, and paranormal phenomenon. Whether you're watching our video live stream or listening to one of our audio programs, you are getting the best from world-renowned researchers and hosts, guiding you through topics the mainstream won't touch. Miss one of your favorite programs? No problem. Head over to the members area at kgradb.com for access to our massive library of award-winning content. Make contact, stay connected, only at kgradb.com.
And we are back with my very special guest, Dr. John Brandenberg, and of course, Mr. Mark Center and Mr. Gerry Kissel.
Don.
We were
By
talking
the way,
about,
I want to point out, you and I, Don, are tall whites.
Oh, okay.
Hey, Don.
I know what you're going to talk about, Don, and I'll just if I may elbow in, I'll give you the version of the story that I heard, and it was not tall whites who basically are white as a sheet of paper and tall. That's the description. I heard it was Pleiadians out at Site 51 and they had a group of them down there doing technology exchange. We're kind of in an under the table alliance with them, which means, by the way, we're out of the woods on this thing pretty much, I believe. The Greys have failed, and the Pleiades, we're in alliance with the Pleiadians, who have starships and are very powerful, and are basically genetically our cousins. But well, here's the story, and this, I consider this story just crazy enough to be true. Is apparently they had two women at Site 51 who were Pleiadian, and the Pleiadians look just like us. I mean, and so they, these two women get tired of being out at Site 51 behind all the razor wire, stuck in the middle of the desert, and they start pestering their human, terrestrial hosts that they want to go to Vegas, because every night the sun sets and they can see this dome of light in the distance over the mountains, and that's Vegas. So they finally made enough of fuss that the guy said, okay, we'll get you some outfits. We'll send you under escort to Vegas for a day. Take in some shows, play the slots, stay away from the poker tables. And so they let him do this. And apparently it went quite smoothly. And then they came back and they were happy. And the reason I believe this story is that the Pleiadians are so much like us that behaviorally they fit in with human beings. In fact, we're part Pleiadian, apparently, because of shore leave in the past. So it makes sense that two women.
That's how it happened in Ireland. Two women from there would cause, would pester their hosts that they wanted to go see Vegas. The guys from the Pleiades, they're all business. They're just, they're doing all this stuff, and they don't have any time to go to Vegas. Who the hell cares, So anyway, so that's what I heard. Now, what I also heard was that the tall whites are rather very fragile, kind of wimpy versions of us, and they wouldn't want to go to Vegas. It's too chaotic, and they supposedly.
Well, the reason I mentioned the tall whites this morning, as I often do after I get a cup of coffee and I sit down, I'm usually up very early.
Sure.
I'm on my cell phone and I start looking at, do I have email, this, that, something else. And I was on Facebook, and I'm sure all of you are familiar with it, they have video clips and stuff called Reels, Reels. And there was a guy there. I kind of thought I recognized his name. His name is Charles Hall, who had been in the U.S. Air Force back in 65, 66, 67.
I know who you're talking about.
And he was stationed out at the site as a weather guy, okay? And it's a very elaborate story, but where he allegedly met the tall whites who were living underground. Okay.
Yeah.
Now,
they don't like being above ground. They don't like light.
Right. I had heard some things about these guys, these alleged ETs, but I found this interesting, even if it's total crap. Okay. It was interesting, but he swears up and down it's the real thing. This is what he claimed.
Hey,
and
man.
They are psychic. These creatures are psychic.
That's why they told them to stay away from the crap tables, in the poker. Poker tables. Well, the other accounts of the tall whites is that they they were very, very paranoid, kind of nervous. And if there was any small change in procedure, like one guy supposedly showed up to escort the tall white party to something at Site 51, and he forgot his clipboard, and his life was in danger because of that. That doesn't sound like a bunch of aliens that would want to go to Vegas. I don't care what they look like.
So do you completely discount everything in the Billy Meyer story if some of this Pleiadian stuff is true?
Well, there are other reports of, I mean, if first of all, something has to explain the fact that the Greys didn't stage a big War of the Worlds invasion and just take this place. Something out there must have held them back, and who else would do it except kind of blood kin, you know, blood's thicker than water, even out in the cosmos, I would imagine. But there are other reports of people being invited on board ships, not abducted, by people who were nice to them.
Yeah.
And you know, and then the Billy Meyer case, you know, it's very difficult to separate the wheat from the chaff there. I
get it. I get it.
I view it as kind of
I kind of discount the whole thing because there's just not enough proof for me. So
yeah, I mean, you know, I thought it was interesting. It was certainly interesting. I read Light Years.
Yeah, and I did too. In fact, I talked to that author, Gary Kinder, I think his name was.
Yeah, what's he saying now?
And I tracked him down many decades after that, and I asked him some questions about his book. And much like the elders, he was just not interested in talking about anything about that story. Nothing.
Well, you know, if you wrote a book and made a bunch of money, what are you going to do? Say, "Oh, I was completely hoodwinked by this one-armed guy."
Hey, I've got a theory I'd like to throw around the deck here.
Sure, a theory.
Yes, and this has to do with Close Encounters. I do enjoy that film a lot. I thought it was a well-made film, and it's kind of like the fourth film in the Star Trek series with the whales. Kind of makes you feel good, right? It's funny, and you laugh and stuff. So I like it in that fashion. However, the new theory that I see in the Facebook reels and the shorts and things is that Devil's Tower is actually the stump of a giant tree. And I was wondering what you guys think of Devil's Tower actually being a petrified stump of a giant tree.
You know, it's really interesting you would raise that theory with me, but we're on YouTube, right? I gotta watch out. There may be small children. There may be women of very refined tastes watching this.
Yes.
I think the Devil's Tower is a volcanic formation. I mean, I live near what's
similar
right now. I'm living in. I grew up near Oregon, a place called the Table Rocks. They're basically the same thing, and they're a big volcanic plug.
Right.
Yeah.
And you know, you got a volcano, and then you got a bunch of hot lava, and then the ash wears away. The volcanic ash wears away and leaves this big plug of basalt. And that's just, you know, that's what the Devil's Tower is.
Because you have some upper education doesn't make you smart. Come on. Yeah. So
the kind of education I got was growing up in Bedford, a logging town, and getting in 2 brawls in high school, and you know, learning to know when a scam was coming down the street.
Yes,
you know, to know which poker game on Friday night not to go to.
So there you go. So with the movies and the touchy-feely, like the Close Encounters, I agree with that, as opposed to the aliens. Here's one that's kind of interesting, that it's way more touchy-feely, and yet it happened at a time that I can't exactly point to something else that was going on with ufology. 1985 Cocoon.
Oh yeah, well that was, I think I watched that once.
I enjoyed the film a lot. It's a touchy.
It was a fun movie.
It's a fun movie. It's got Raquel Welch's very hot daughter in it, and I'm wondering, there has to be just movies made for the sake of movies, right? It can't
of course
all
there are.
be made to like point you to something like don't look over here, because I can't remember anything in 85 or around there that was.
No, Mark, you're right. Some of this stuff is just, it's
fun.
Second and third, it's derived from how many B movies were there that were inspired by Star Wars? I mean, there's Star Crash.
Yeah.
That's one that I like. And
right.
There's all sorts of stuff out there that is just plainly derivative, and they often look like it. And if you ask the CIA, did you guys give them the script for that? They'll say, we wouldn't waste our time with that production company. They just stole our stuff from something else. And but the big movies, like, to me, here's the weird thing. There's another movie made in 1957 called The Mysterians. The Devil's Tower actually appears in it for a few seconds.
Japanese film.
Yeah, Japanese film by the same guys who brought you Godzilla. And it's an alien base coming up out of the ground, and it's got a big plug of dirt on it. The plug falls away, and finally it reveals this dome. But before the plug falls away, it looks exactly like Devil's Tower.
Yeah.
And when I saw that, I got chills. Now, as you know, I wrote a science fiction novel, Morning Star Past, The Collapse of the UFO Cover-Up. And, I have that same kind of mesa is the alien base near this mythical town of Morningstar, Colorado. And I didn't know anything about the San Luis Valley being a center of UFO activity when I chose that as the site of this town. By the way, we're trying to get that made into a movie, and we've gotten some feelers from Hollywood. So that's good. By the way, in the movie, the secret government is in bed with the aliens, only nobody can figure that out because everything's compartmentalized secret. And so that when the two women actually start bringing down the UFO cover-up, their first reaction is nobody will believe these two bimbos. They're both news anchors at this little upstart network. And they bring down the UFO cover-up and trigger a big congressional investigation. The UFO government decides that the UFO cover-up is too big to fail. So they attempt a coup d'etat. So we have tank battles in the streets between National Guard and loyal military and the brigade that they deploy to Washington, D.C. in black. And, every other country has had some episode like this in its history. We haven't had one yet, but that we do in this scenario.
Cool.
And by the way, the UFO forces, the secret government forces that are allied with the aliens, the Greys in this case, they're counting on the Greys to show up in the sky over Washington, D.C. to produce shock and awe. They don't want any fighting. They just want to give us what we want. But because of the two women, they have to rush their plans. So instead of 6 months to plan for it, they have 1 week. And of course, everything goes wrong. Everything. It's cloudy. No one can see the aliens up in the sky over Washington, D.C. In the meantime, the Maryland and Delaware National Guard have showed up with tanks to oppose the government, the secret government forces. And it takes the Pentagon about 8 hours to get its shit in one sock, pardon me. And they have a knockdown, drag out battle at Capitol Hill. And finally, by the morning, Navy fighters show up. The Air Force is nowhere to be seen because they're allied with the secret government. And the Navy shows up and is napalming the troops in black near the Vietnam Memorial. That's how bad things get. So it's a.
Well, it sounds like
this is very dramatic. This is 7 Days in May meets Dr. Strangelove meets Thelma and Louise, basically. But they bring down the UFO cover-up and they finally attack the big base at Morningstar, Colorado. Morningstar, by the way, is the name of a little hamlet with a grocery store and a gas station in Virginia that I stumbled on one day just out for a drive. Right. And I thought it was a nice name. So so anyway, we're looking to make that into a movie, and wish us luck. Hopefully Hollywood won't turn both women into trannies or something like that. And
so
we're past all of that.
Here's a question I wanted to ask you, Mars related, which I haven't asked.
Yes, Mars.
With the standing environment there, the standing atmosphere and stuff, can it be, with the technology we have today, can it be terraformed? With how it is, very thin atmosphere, right?
Yes.
So could it be terraformed with the technology that we have?
I believe there's plenty of water there, especially just beneath the surface. The northern polar cap is like 3 miles thick. There's enough ice in the northern polar cap to cover the planet to a depth of several feet. And you don't need that much water. You just need you need to be very clever, and you need to. My model is the mezcal cactus, not the what's the cactus they use to make tequila with?
Right.
Yeah, mezcal. You kind of bioengineer that to survive under the Martian conditions, and it makes oxygen all day. I mean, the fourth most abundant gas in the Martian atmosphere is oxygen, and they can't explain why it's there. By the way, by the way, guys, you got to realize, not only do we have a UFO cover-up at this point, we have a Mars cover-up. There's a dead civilization there. It was apparently wiped out by a thermonuclear attack from space. It looks like it was a primitive civilization. Oh, what's also interesting, by the way, their faces look like us. They didn't look like grays. They don't look like lizards. They look like us. So it suggests that something like humanity predates humanity on Earth, which is consistent with these people, these Pleiadian type people. Don't ask me to explain how that would happen biologically.
Well, back in around 83.
Yeah.
During the height of the remote viewing Stargate program.
Yes.
Joe McGonigal, one of the stars of that program.
Yes.
Was brought in to do a remote viewing session by the CIA.
Yes.
And they gave him the coordinates and whatever, however they worked that out. And he later, as he reported, he ended up in this strange place that looked as if people were trying to find somewhere to shelter in place. These humanoid beings running around. very large compared to us, 7, 8, 9 feet tall.
Sure.
And the bottom line is that after the session was over, he was curious about where the hell was this place? Was this real? What was it? It turned out he was tasked to remote view Mars
Yes.
1 million years ago.
I know.
1 million.
We only heard about that later. I will confess to being the clueless tool of the U.S. government, apparently, in this. So were myself and a bunch of other people. There was an investigation started by Richard Hoagland, a colorful character, but very, very smart. But anyway, we ran something that was similar to the early internet, and we did this investigation, and we verified that the pictures of the face from Mars, there were 2 pictures taken at 2 different times of day with very high resolution, and also there was a pyramid within 5 kilometers, and NASA never shows the pictures, the full frame of the pictures with the pyramid and the face in the same frame, because it would be you wouldn't need to be a rocket scientist to figure out, oh, you're looking at a dead civilization, not not just some landforms. So we did this investigation, and the headquarters of the investigation was at SRI in Stanford, California, Stanford Research Institute. And we found out later that it was just down the hall from Hal Puthoff and his remote viewing group. We only found that out like 5 years later. And we just thought, we actually heard the reports that, the remote viewers had basically given the limitations of remote viewing. By the way, when I worked in Washington, D.C., people would tell me, who were in the know, that the remote viewing was considered kind of just another source of information, along with rumors, satellite photos, things like this, and that it had been right often enough that they couldn't get rid of it. They could not let go of it, because even though they didn't like it, the agencies I heard about did not like it. They tended to pass it around among the different agencies because it was like a hot potato. But it had been right often enough, and they would then concentrate resources to check out its supposed findings other ways and confirm that the remote viewers had actually found something, that it was considered a valuable source of intelligence. But in the intelligence game, you get lots of information, basically in the form of reports. There was even a department of what's called rumor intelligence, called RUMINT, where you just track rumors. What do people say in their sleep in the local brothel?
Nice.
What do people? How much for number 12?
What?
How much for number 12?
Hey guys, I gotta go. It's always great.
Mark.
It's great to see you, John. Thanks for.
Hey, Mark. Thanks for your questions. Thanks for your comments. You're a very valuable part of this.
All right, and Don, I'll give you a call tomorrow, and we'll talk about the rest of the show. Got to go get the wife.
Okay, buddy. Have a good one.
All right.
Okay, man. Thank you.
Buddy.
Take care now. Drive safe.
Thank you.
And then there were 3.
Then there were 3. They all had their backs to the wall. We're looking at each other.
Agatha Christie and the band Genesis.
Yeah. Well, it is what it is.
It is what it is. I'll tell you, speaking of poker games, in my hometown, my next door neighbor, who was a good buddy of mine, and I learned a lot from this guy, and he decided to start hosting poker games at his place. His parents would leave for the weekends, and he would have the place to himself. So he started having these poker games at his house on Friday nights. And, you know, to me, I was seeing this girl that I later married. We became engaged and we got married and everything. Different story. But, you know, I sat in on a few of these games, but the stakes got to be really high. You know, to me, $5, that was a lot of money in those days, especially, you know, if you're going to put in a poker game and lose most of it probably in about an hour. So I just quit going there. But finally the toughest guys in town are showing up for this poker game, and the stakes keep getting higher and higher. These guys are all determined to show what big wheels, and finally they're betting their week's paychecks on these games. And so one night, finally, after about a month of this, and I had just, you know, quit going about 2 months before. There are better things I had to spend money on. And so finally, there's $200 on the table in the pot. And the time came for everyone to show their cards at Kirkendall's card game on Friday night. So everybody started laying down their cards, and just then the lights went out. And when the lights came back on again, several guys had black eyes and swollen mouths, and everybody had their backs against the wall. They were all pressed up against the wall looking at each other. The table was tipped over and all the money was gone. Everyone had just reached in and grabbed whatever they could. So that was the end of the Friday night card game at Joe's.
And as Sean Connery would say, there endeth the lesson.
What's that? What did he say?
Sean Connery would say, and there endeth the lesson.
Well, it was great. It was a great, and I talked to several people, and they said, "Oh yeah, it happened. It happened." I managed to get $40. I grabbed the $40 out of the pot, you know, and so anyway, it was crazy. So that's the theme of my novel, you know, that pretty soon the stakes get high enough in Washington, D.C., and boom, the rules change. The lights go out.
Well, you know, that reel or those shorts that I looked at today.
Yeah.
We're talking about craft that very closely resembled the Tic Tac from the famous Tic Tac videos.
Sure.
And now from almost the beginning of this story, when it broke back in 2017, 2018, one of the guys from UAP Crossfire, Commander Cobra, had his own show on KGRA called Task Force Griffin several years back. Very, very bright guy, a military pilot. Now he is a contractor for the military. He was in the Air Force, the Coast Guard, been around the world, God only knows how many times. The bottom line was he maintained almost from the get-go, he was convinced these Tic Tacs were manufactured, right here on Earth. Okay. Now, in this reel this morning, that was one of the things that was mentioned, that Lockheed Martin are actually the people manufacturing these craft using some off-world technology What do you guys think about that?
Quite reasonably, you know, if I'm hearing stories that you know, the Pleiadians are down here giving us technologies, and you can make compact power sources and anti-gravity, then yeah, stuff like the Tic Tacs would be, in fact, they would be one of the first things you would kind of trot out to the public.
Well, let me ask you this. Is it a good idea that they just hand this technology to us without any brain sweat on our end to just take this and utilize it and possibly use it abusingly? Because we didn't have any real effort to develop this. You see what I'm saying?
It's the Star Trek conundrum with Scotty bringing transparent aluminum.
Yes, that's right. There you go. And he just told him it was basically possible and showed him theoretically it was possible. And then the rest of it, they
still had to do the labor of figuring it out. And it probably didn't happen all at once, Don. It probably, you're probably talking decades. And you know that the Department of Defense has, you know, all the branches, what I'm referring to, especially those that work with Lockheed Skunk Works, tend to cart these things out and fly them over civilized areas on purpose in order to see reactions to it. And not everybody in the military will get to see these things or know that they exist, which could be what these Tic Tacs are. Is like, yeah, maybe Skunk Works is working on something and they got, you know, dog and ponied out to test them out with some Navy aviators. I don't know. That seems as plausible as anything to me.
Well, Jerry, you've raised a good point, by the way. These Tic Tacs were flown over the ocean. Guess what happens if one of them malfunctions? It's in the drink. That's the Navy's problem. Then they just
hard to recover.
Yeah, hard to recover. You know, Joe Blow is not going to go out there with a scuba tank and try and get one of these things off the bottom of the ocean. No, that's you know, it's a great place to do it because having it over the ocean, no busybodies can go try and get pieces of it. And what you also do in a situation like this is you create, well, you're all familiar with signal to noise ratio, you know.
Mm-hmm.
If you put out enough noise, it's really difficult to figure out what the real signal is. So what they did, you know, and the by the way, the British were experts at this in World War II. You know, that was like Operation Mincemeat. They got a body from a bar and convinced the Germans that we were going to invade freaking Sardinia. I mean, there's nothing there. And yet the Germans put an armored division there, you know, that wasn't there waiting for us on. They had Sicily just about completely unguarded. So what you do is you, if you're trying to acclimate the public to the fact that there's UFOs, but at the same time, you don't want the public to know the real truth. You keep the rule. In fact, you mix just enough lies with the real information so that it like has a destruct package on it. I mean, like Bob Lazar, who apparently worked at Los Alamos. He's a legit guy. What did they do? They hired him at Site 51. They had him work there 2 weeks, showed him a bunch of stuff, then put a gun to his head and escorted him off the base and let him yak. He basically understood nothing that he saw, or, you know, his site, you know, he keeps talking about element 115. You know, they've made it, it lasts 1/1000th of a second and then falls apart. I mean, as a physicist, this is not what they're using to fly these things. They're probably just using fusion energy. We know that is possible, and we're going to do it ourselves. But you see what I'm getting at? You put out enough false information. Like in my novel Morningstar Pass, they have these bunch of special forces guys, and they're up in Xenia, Ohio, and there are all these UFO sightings because the 8 Grays are building a base right near Wright-Patterson, where the air staff is based. So there's all these UFO sightings. So they catch these guys launching balloons with flares on them in the middle of all this UFO stuff. And so they follow them back to this broken down farm and open the trailer house door. You know, there's a trailer house there, and they open the door. Oh, it's one of the other organizations involved in the UFO cover-up called NATEX, which the Special Forces people call Snake. And they say, "What are you doing? There's already a lot of UFO sightings here. What are you doing launching balloons with flares on them?" And the guy says, "Well, it's just information management, you know, just information management. We wanted to create a lot of noise. And, you know, so we're doing that. It's a disinformation op," he says. And so they you know, they get back in their car. The Special Forces guys get back in their cars and drive away, muttering obscenities, you know, back down to back into town, you know. And so, yeah, you do stuff like this. You fly around a lot of fake stuff. The triangles, I think the triangle craft are our version of the of reverse engineered technology, and you can kind of tell because the triangle is based on the theories I've worked on. It's Tesla 3-phase rotating power, so you need 3 coils to create this rotating field.
I heard that about almost 30 years ago.
Good, yeah.
That was our craft.
Well, I'm curious. Did you hear that before or after the Phoenix incident?
Oh, before.
Oh, yeah, there was the triangle stuff over Belgium where they had jet fighters chasing these triangles, and you know, Belgium being Belgium, you know, if one of them crashes, the NATO people just show up and take away the pieces. And if any of the Belgies...
they were overflying the headquarters of NATO. That's something that was not widely disseminated. Yeah, they were over Belgium. But
yeah,
I'm convinced, and was then, that whoever were flying those things were sending a message.
Yes.
Kind of like Washington, D.C., July of 52.
Oh, by the way, they say there's been more UFO sightings over Washington again. I don't know. What did you guys hear? You guys didn't hear anything about that?
No.
I haven't this week, but I've not been watching any news.
You're newsed out after the election, huh?
I get burned out. I got burned out after the election. I'm like, I'm kind of done right now. I got to take a break.
That's too bad. Are you going to swear
I
off?
can get as angry as Don Ecker.
You know, we've heard about this, the 4Bs movement that swears off sex with men. They're all shaving their heads.
Oh, those crazy people. Yeah, they're insane.
The four rhymes with itches.
Right.
Well, okay. So
I'm sorry.
We just had more congressional hearings.
Yes.
Okay, before Thanksgiving. And I've heard nothing good about any of those.
Crickets. No earth-shattering results. Here's what I heard. That somebody asked, you know, Elizondo makes this big statement. He says, there's craft not made by any government on earth surveilling some of our most sensitive military sites. Okay, that was the one statement that came out of this. And then somebody tracked him down and asked him, well, do you have any theories, or who, you say no government on Earth, do you have any theories who it could be? And he said, I'm not authorized to say anything more. So even he is apparently still a team player. He's only saying what he's allowed to say. Anybody thinks that he's not, he's blowing a special government issued dog whistle. It's not a real whistle for everybody to listen to, apparently. And, I've met him. He seemed like a sincere guy to me, but yeah, he's a man on a mission. He's a team player. He's only revealing what he's been authorized to reveal. And my theory, I have a theory, you guys.
Well, let's hear it.
Okay, my theory is that we are some lucky sons of guns. Here, by the way, the original arrival of the Greys came about 40 years after the invention of radio, and that's just about the light travel time to Zeta Reticuli. So they got in their faster than light ships and came here. What do they find? World War II going on. Doesn't look like a good time to invade, does it? Especially if you've got hardly anybody backing you up. By the time they build up forces here, we got the Cold War going. We're nuclear armed to the teeth. In fact, Roswell was the government defense. I'm convinced the government shot down 2 UFOs over Roswell because they were snooping on our then total supply of nuclear weapons, all 5 of them. Just like, we've all heard these reports. And by the way, even I, who's not a nuclear weapons expert, can tell you, guess what initiates nuclear weapons? And you can check this out on your Wikipedia. It's high explosives. Do you need a computer to set off high explosives? No. You can light them with a fuse. You can build the original little boy that they dropped on Hiroshima. One of the guys on the bomber could have lit a fuse on the back end of that thing and shoved it out the bomb bay. It had gone off just fine. You don't need anything complicated. The complicated part is the uranium and the plutonium, but setting it off, you don't need a computer for that. And here's another. And by the way, Philip Corso said the reason we built up so many nuclear weapons, as they told me at Livermore Lab, which is a nuclear weapons lab, we were doing energy research there, but I was in the area that also did nuclear weapons. They said we have enough nuclear weapons on both sides, the Soviet Union and us, to make the rubble jump 10 times on every major city on Earth. Stir up the rubble 10 times. First one makes rubble, then the rest of it is just for show. So why would you develop such a thing? Well, let's say you're threatened with an invasion from outer space, both you and the Russians. After Ditlev Pass, after a bunch of other stuff happened in the United States, we're determined that we'll wire the house with dynamite. The bank's gonna try and take our house. We'll wire it with dynamite. Say, go ahead, take it.
Dead man switch.
I got a Ronson lighter and a fuse here.
Yeah, dead man switch.
Dead man switch. Thank you. Yeah, they have both sides had dead man switch, and apparently there was an under the table agreement that if the place was going to fall to the Greys, we'd set off everything. Oh, by the way, guess what they use as ballast on a lot of airplanes, especially military aircraft? Depleted uranium. Now you could say, oh, well, they got a lot of it sitting around, because they've strained out the uranium-235 from the 238. When you build a hydrogen bomb, though, you pack it around it uranium-238. It doesn't matter if it's depleted or not. This hydrogen bomb, when it goes off, will actually set off the uranium, even though it's normally inert. You can't build an atomic bomb out of it. but you can double the yield of a hydrogen bomb by packing a bunch of depleted uranium around it. So guess what they put as ballast weights on all the military aircraft and even a lot of commercial? Depleted uranium. When this stuff, if you have an airplane crash, the stuff ignites like magnesium and burns, and then you got radioactive, slightly radioactive waste to dispose of. Why would anybody do that when tungsten, what they make light bulbs out of, filaments, or they used to, it's just as dense. It doesn't ignite in air, and it's not radioactive, and costs $1 a pound versus depleted uranium, they estimate it's about $100 a pound. Why would you put all the military aircraft and a lot of our munitions for anti-tank with depleted uranium when you could use tungsten instead? And the reason is you want that dead man switch to be a real big switch. And what that means, and I think that we were involved in a Cold War for outer space with the Greys, and we wanted to be sure that they understood that we would never let them take this planet as anything more than a radioactive wasteland. We take as many of them with us as we could and blow the whole thing to pieces. It would be useless to them, and they would have expended all this time and treasure for nothing. That's what my theory is. And by the way, guess what happened to all the nuclear warheads when the Cold War ended? They dismantled them and took them, chopped them up into little tiny pieces and buried them in various places. No, they didn't. They stored them. They just took them off the missiles and stored them in a warehouse someplace.
Well, they got a shelf life, don't they?
They do. They got a good shelf life. These things were built to last 20 years. Every once in a while, you got to change out one or two of the components, but they would change those out every 5 years.
Well, I'll tell you why I ask.
Yeah.
Back in the very early 90s, I met a guy, vetted him, verified he was who he said he was.
Yes, good.
Had been You're a detective. With naval intelligence.
Yes.
Right? He was involved with this is what I was told.
Mm-hmm.
He was involved during the 84 Olympics when the Olympics were being held here in Los Angeles. And there had allegedly been a terrorist plot where a nuclear device was smuggled into LA.
When was this done?
84.
Wow.
84. With the intent, I'm presuming, to detonate it during the Olympics.
Sure.
Okay. But they had been tracked. There's a federal agency called NEST, which can track radioactive material.
Oh, sure. This puts out gamma rays.
This thing came in allegedly on a ship, an ocean-going vessel.
Yep.
Was smuggled off. And then the Special Forces team took them down in a hotel here in LA and grabbed this device. Now, this is what I was told. Do I know any of this? I
can just imagine the knock on the door they got.
Room service. Yeah.
Did we order room service? Oh, I don't know. Ahmed.
Why don't they just use the one that everybody falls for?
What?
Land shark. I mean, say it's Candygram. Candygram.
So anyway, Don, so they took these people down. The Cloak and Dagger department handled this little matter.
That's what I was told.
By the way, I was in D.C. I went through 9/11 in D.C. It was I just chilled when it was going on. I was standing next to a guy. We were watching on the big screen. We watched the first building fall in the big conference room, where everybody in the building it's standing room only. We're all standing there watching we watched the South Tower fall. Guy next to me bursts into tears. And I said, get a grip. We're at war. Get a grip. We're at war now. And I just chilled. And, but, even like a year later, finally, when the Pentagon got hit, I mean, there was just palpable fear. We thought, the building we're standing in could be next. And I remember I was tired one day and thinking, oh, that was just a movie I saw or a bad dream, and realizing, oh my God, no, it was really happened. I was down in Kennedy Space Center, but in the days after 9/11, we got the report that they were worried there were several nuclear suitcase bombs circulating in the country, and that we should not be surprised if one of them went off. And they were warning us, if that happens, don't panic. We are looking for them.
What's the estimated yield?
Oh, for the suitcase ones, probably, 100 tons of TNT, enough to, level about 3 or 4 city blocks in New York City, and of course, make it very radioactive. And so it was, but apparently the Cloak and Dagger department handled that, and we never heard anything more about it. But a friend of mine, whom I grew up with, a close friend, he immediately, his reaction to 9/11 was to move him and his family out of DC. They moved to Colorado. He says, you don't know half the stuff that's happened, John. I can't go into the details, he says, but I'm getting my family out of this town because it's a target now. And he wouldn't go into any detail at all, but apparently something really put the scare into him. So they may have caught one of those suitcase bombs, at the Air and Space Museum or something like that. Or the hotel down the street, the Hilton. Room service.
Room service.
And so I, that scenario. But just imagine if you're a little gray and you're trying to plot every 6 months, you're supposed to try and figure out if now is the time the Earth can be taken with enough shock and awe. You don't want to do a lot of fighting. Just, Sun Tzu, the best way to win a war is without any fighting at all. Do it entirely with razzle dazzle and shock and awe. Get enough traitors in the government to open the gates at night to take the major cities, and no fighting at all. And so that's why my view on threats from outer space is make them fight a war. Make them absolutely fight a war, because that's automatically a non-optimal path to taking a nice blue planet like this one. This planet is
I got no doubt there are enough people out there that would never give it up. I mean,
no, they'd never give it up. No, never.
No.
Well,
guys, we are in the last 45 seconds of the show. John, do you get any final remarks or comments you want to make?
The final words of the wizard, the head of the UFO cover-up, just before he dies, is, except for 2 women and a bunch of cowboys, I could have owned the world, he says.
Yeah. Gary, how about you, buddy?
Cubs win. Cubs win.
Well, like I said, 22 days before Christmas Eve. 22 days. Well, that's it for this week. Next week, we're going to have Mr. Mark
thank you so much.
D'Antonio on. You bet.
Ooh, Mark
Mr. Mark D'Antonio
Okay,
on.
guys. Live long and prosper.
John, can I finish?
Happy holiday. Sure. Yes.
You're talking over me. So anyway, Mark D'Antonio will be here next Monday. And that's it for this week. Have a great week. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.